this week was the killing of Dr. Marwan Al-Sultan, who was the director of the Indonesian hospital and a cardiologist. So in that photo, four of them have been assassinated, several targeted at their homes, not collateral damage from attacks on fighters or caught in crossfire. But Mehdi, I want you to talk about the targeting of medical professionals, because that is what I think people don't understand, because it sounds so insane to say it out loud. That
it sounds insane to say it out loud. I mean, three things I think sound insane over the last 21 months, 22 months that we've normalized. One, obviously, is the deliberate killing of journalists, which a lot of journalists in the West have a lot of problem comprehending. The other is the deliberate killing of children, of course. Gunshot wounds to the head, sniper shots, not collateral damage. And of course, the third is the doctors, the killing of doctors, nurses, paramedics, the deliberate targeting and destruction of Gaza's healthcare. And that is what the premise, that was the basis of this film is. And this film, produced by award-winning filmmakers at Basement Films in the UK, made over several months, went through rigorous checks, went through the BBC editorial process for much of it, right of reply, fantastic lead reporter, Ramita Navai, award-winning war correspondent. And they put together this film, this hour-long film, based on eyewitness testimony from Palestinian doctors and survivors, as well as Dr. Adnan al-Barouch, who you just mentioned. He's in this film, but he's since been killed in Israeli captivity, tortured and died in prison, killed in prison, as one of his colleagues says. So you've got eyewitness testimony from Palestinian doctors to what they have had to endure. We also have an Israeli medic whistleblower in the film who served at Stay Taman, the Israeli gulag, the prison, the black site where they've taken Palestinian detainees to be tortured, raped, killed. So it's all there, put together in the film. And you mentioned, the targeting of doctors, saying it out loud. Perhaps the most powerful moment for me in the film, and we just, I would urge Breaking Point's viewers to go to the Zeteo Twitter feed or Zeteo Blue Sky. We actually put up a clip from the film last night, separate to the trailer, which is one of the most powerful moments in the film, from Dr. Khalid Hamouda, who is a surgeon in Gaza, now in Egypt, who was bombed in his home with his family, a family of other doctors. At first, 10 people killed. They then flee, him, his wife, his child, and they go down the street. By the way, his house is blown up, not the entire street, just his house. They then go down the street to take refuge, and a drone follows them down the street and attacks them again. And he wakes up in a hospital and sees a nurse carrying his child, his daughter, who's dead. The next morning, his wife, the mother of his child, is also dead. He's told, killed. He's the only survivor, or one of the only survivors, I believe, from that massacre. And she says, Ramita Navai, you were targeted? He says, yes. The drone came and targeted us. And this is what we heard from the World Central Kitchen folks when they were in the humanitarian convoy and they were targeted car to car to car. This is what we've heard from journalists, of course. And this is what we have to get our heads around, that the United States of America has been arming and funding a country that is systematically, this is a key word here, destroying the Gaza healthcare system, destroying doctors and medics. And the key point here, and it comes out in the film, you could rebuild hospitals in years to come. Trump can turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East and build as many hospitals as he like. You cannot rebuild that knowledge base. You cannot rebuild that human base. You cannot just get doctors back over. Gazan society, Palestine has spent years educating itself in this way, and the Israelis have deliberately targeted it.
Well, let's take a look at the trailer. This is C1 to get a sample of what people can expect from the film.
Israel has been killing the very people trying to keep the healthcare system alive, its doctors and medics, despite hospitals and healthcare workers being protected under international law. As Israel has bombed Gaza, hundreds of Palestinian doctors and medics have refused to leave their hospitals.
We are in the theater, in the operating room, full darkness, no water, no electricity. But we have a hero, surgeons in Gaza.
Hundreds of medics have been killed. Hundreds have been detained. Many of them have been forcibly disappeared. Our Palestinian team on the ground have gathered testimony from health workers and their families.
المهم علقوني في قلب زي المعلقين هذول كلهم معلقين علقوا علقني كله بنزف دم.
And Israeli whistleblowers have told us they witnessed Palestinian prisoners being tortured, and that some Israeli medics are complicit.
I don't even think that in the Israeli society there is a need for cover-up these days. You can do almost whatever you want when it comes to Gazans.
Well, one of the things people concede, Mehdi, is that this is a high production value film. And the BBC funded this film. The BBC then refused to air it and was giving quote unquote bullshit reasons, according to a source who told that to The Independent. And Mehdi, you have probably a lot of insight into this process of why the BBC, which had recently aired the Louis Theroux documentary, I believe that was on BBC. Yes. What happened? What's your understanding of why they ended up getting rid of a film that they funded?
So the BBC put out a very long statement, a bullshit statement, I would argue as well. Their argument was that they had this other documentary that they aired on Gaza, which became super controversial, I would argue, for unnecessary reasons. Mm-hmm. It was narrated by a child in Gaza, surviving the war, and it turns out the child was the son of a deputy agriculture minister in the Gaza government, some technocrat, who was then labeled, of course, as just Hamas. And there was a huge furor in the UK that the BBC had put out a film from the child of a Hamas minister, even though, again, it was a well-sourced, well-made, high-production value film. The child had not decided the editorial agenda. But while they were, quote-unquote, investigating how that happened, they decided to park this film, which, as you say, they'd spent a lot of money on, spent many months making, with Basement Films, who we at Zeteo know well because they made a film for us last year called Israel's Real Extremism, which I came on the show to talk about, if memory serves me correctly then. And the fundamental argument from the BBC was, well, Basement Films went out and talked about the process while we were still trying to get everything approved. They then put out, Basement were frustrated, of course. My friend Ben DePere, who's the executive producer, former head of Channel 4 News, very respected, award-winning journalist, he went out at the Sheffield Documentary Festival and said, come on, this is ridiculous. We've got doctors in the film waiting for this film to come out. We're showing disrespect to people who risk their lives to talk to us. Sources, whistleblowers, survivors of massacres. The BBC put out a statement saying, well, if we put it out now, there will be the perception of partiality, and the BBC can't have the perception of partiality. The great irony being, of course, that their decision not to air this film that they commissioned, that ran through their checks, that is the greatest perception of partiality. It's partiality towards Israel. They have now run one Gaza doc and then pulled it. It's nowhere to be seen because apparently it was the child of a Hamas minister bullshit argument. And now they didn't even air the other Gaza documentary. And then add that to all of the rest of the coverage of the BBC's of Gaza over the last 21, 22 months, which has been abysmal, which has caused multiple internal backlashes, protests from BBC staff who are frustrated at what their broadcaster has done. This is a BBC that has been cowed, intimidated, pressured, bullied. This is a BBC. I used to work at the BBC. I used to defend the BBC when I worked in the UK from right-wing bullshit attacks. But I think I've never seen in my entire lifetime, I'm about to turn 46 years old, in my entire lifetime of watching the BBC, I've been watching the BBC since children's cartoons on a Saturday morning, and I can honestly say it's never taken a beating like this. I've never had such a depressing, disappointing view of the national broadcast in the UK that I've had since October 2023. I know many other people who've stopped watching the BBC, stopped appearing on the BBC, because their coverage has been so shameful, not just in the documentary space, but in the news space, the online space, the ridiculous headlines. There was a study by the Center for Media Monitoring recently, which said they give 33 times as much coverage per Israeli casualty as they do per Palestinian casualty. So there's not a perception of partiality, there's a well-documented evidence of partiality towards Israel.